When people call the desert the forbidden zone of life, in the desert of China, we saw a vibrant oasis. There are grains, a lot of plants, and huge reservoirs in the deserts of China. China is known as the most successful country in desert control in the world. In 60 years, they planted 800 million trees in the desert. I don't think any country is willing to do this, nor does it have the patience to persist. American sand control experts once believed that China will control the desert through national finance, and it will not succeed if there is no profit to recycle. So why is China willing to do this? Of the 800 million trees planted in China, how many are still alive? China's desert covers an area of 2.62 million square kilometers, accounting for 20% of the country's land area. Most of them are concentrated in the northwest region of China, represented by Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Gansu and Ningxia. These deserts have brought great harm to the local residents. In the early 1950s, China was still struggling to solve the problem of food and clothing, and there was no money to invest in desert control. When quicksand erodes people's land and farmland, all humans can do is relocate. But the tolerance of human beings will only make the desert more and more rampant. The Sahara Desert not only affects the Middle East but also African countries, and Egypt bears the brunt when dust storms strike in spring. The capital Cairo, Alexandria and other places will be affected. In severe cases, flights will be cancelled and ports will be closed, causing inconvenience to transportation and residents. The United States is also a victim of the desert. The United States was once the country most affected by sandstorms in the world. The 1920s and 1930s were called the sandstorm era in the United States. In the end, the United States spent a lot of manpower and material resources to build a protective forest belt, which curbed the attack of sandstorms. And China is the same. Beijing, as the capital of China, is blown by strong winds, blowing the wind and sand that blows people's eyes. In the most serious time, it was ravaged by sandstorms for 20 consecutive days, and the dust fell from the sky like rain. The population affected by desertification in China at the same time. Desertification will cause a serious decline in land productivity and aggravate natural disasters. Therefore, in order to solve the problem of deteriorating deserts, China has followed the example of the United States and carried out projects such as the construction of sheltered forests and the afforestation of key sandstorm hazardous areas, and carried out large-scale sand prevention and control. It was at this time that China began to plant a large number of trees in the desert. In just a few decades, 800 million trees were planted. China's 3 North Shelter Belt is one of the key projects for sand control. The area of trees planted every year is equivalent to more than half of South Korea's 3 North Shelter Belt, although it costs a lot. But I have to admit that the results are remarkable. But in recent years, a large number of these trees have also died, and people can only continue to plant trees. If it stops, it is hard to imagine whether the desert will deteriorate again. In the Taklamakan Desert in China, you can see a lot of Populus euphratica. Populus euphratica is called the undead tree in the desert. It has drought resistance, high temperature resistance. The main root can reach 10 m underground, and the lateral root can extend as far as 30 m. Less dependent on water, this plant can prevent wind and fix sand and improve soil. Under the Taklamakan Desert in China, people found an underground river with sufficient water source, but mining water source in the desert is not a good thing, and it is extremely difficult. So the water source for planting trees in the desert can only be diverted from the upper river, and the melting water of glaciers and snow gathers in summer, and it is obtained by drilling wells. The most successful governance in China is the Kubuki Desert. According to a report released by the United Nations Environment Program, Kubuki Desert has been restored and afforested 9.69 million mu of desert, 15.4 million tons of carbon sequestration, 24.376 billion cubic meters of water conservation, and 18.3 million oxygen release. The change of ecological environment drives the local people out of poverty and towards prosperity. Now 56% of the desert has been converted into an oasis, creating a miracle of turning the desert into an oasis. For this reason, the United Nations awarded the Land Life Award to the desert, and made the desert's governance model a model of the world's governance of deserts. So, how does China manage the desert? In 2016, Jack Ma, the richest man in China, joined the Sand Control Project. He invented a public welfare software and forest. People can receive energy through a health plan of 10,000 steps a day, and then plant a tree on the software. The planting of this kind of tree is not virtual. The company will fund to plant a real tree in the desert and grant the user a unique number certificate. You can go to the desert to find the tree you planted on the software. This is a very meaningful thing. Since the software was launched, the area of tree planting in China has continued to expand. By 2022, the total energy generated by users has been used to plant 320 million haloxylon trees. In addition, China has also combined other methods to control the desert. First, solar power stations are installed in the desert to grow green plants. Photovoltaic panels can effectively reduce the evaporation of surface water by shading direct sunlight. The shading effect of photovoltaic panels can reduce evaporation by 20% to 30%, and the photovoltaic module board can also effectively reduce the wind speed. This can improve the living environment of plants very well. It is for the above reasons that many surface vegetation, including pastures, can grow. Second, drilling wells near the desert and building desert reservoirs. These two projects are undoubtedly miracle projects in China. In order to solve the problem of water sources in desert control, China built a reservoir with a capacity of 148 million cubic meters. It took nearly 40 years to build the reservoir. After completion, the reservoir not only irrigated more than 600,000 mu of farmland of local farmers, but also provided water for the two deserts next to the reservoir. People planted wheatgrass in the desert to fix sand, and a large number of plants are grown in the desert near the reservoir. In the past, these deserts were full of yellow sand and sparsely populated, and they were forbidden areas for life. Now they are full of vitality, and some animals have made their homes here. Third, plant sand fixation. This method is the most fundamental and effective measure to control quicksand. The use of grids to plant plants can not only play a role in windbreak and sand fixation, restoration and improvement of the ecological environment, but also provide fuel and feed for people and livestock in mountainous areas. China stabilizes sand dunes and prevents desertification by establishing artificial vegetation, restoring natural vegetation, and building large-scale sand-blocking sand forest belts. In addition, China has also invented a minimally invasive airflow tree planting method. The water jet sprayed by a pressurized water gun is used to punch a small hole with a diameter of several centimeters and a depth of 1 meter in the sand, and then the saplings are quickly planted and the hole is dug. Planting trees, backfilling, watering, all in one go. The average time to plant a tree is less than 10 seconds. Only 3 liters of water are needed to plant each tree. This method can reduce the cost of tree planting from $700 per hectare to $500 per person, and at the same time can increase the survival rate of saplings from 10% to about 90%. Of course, China's sand control methods are far more than these. In recent decades, from artificial to intelligent methods, they have found some of the most effective sand control methods among hundreds of methods. China can become the most successful country in desert control in the world because of the selfless contribution of the government. If the government is not willing to spend a lot of money on this project, the deterioration of the desert will inevitably put the nearby residents in trouble, and hundreds of millions of people will be relocated. It is bound to become China's biggest headache. Now there are a large number of green plants in the deserts of China, forming a huge natural barrier, so that the people nearby can no longer worry about their living environment. This is the fruit of the labor of several generations, and it is also a proof of the persistence of the Chinese people. Such achievements have shocked American scientists. At present, in the face of the deterioration of the powerful desert, it is not enough to control the desert through the government's unilateral efforts. But China is a country with a population of 1.4 billion. Hundreds of thousands of people participate in desert control work every year. In addition to Chinese, there are also some foreigners who are interested in desert control. A large number of planted trees died, but human efforts finally made the desert no longer full of yellow sand, but turned into a peaceful oasis, full of hope everywhere. What do you think about this? If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and comment. Thank you for watching.